The story begins with Alia, the most sought-after girl in school because of her stunning looks and for being half Russian on her father's side. She's an all-around genius, excelling in both academics and sports. This year, she's also taken on the role of treasurer for the student council. As she walks through the halls, students make way for her. Then a senior steps in her path, introducing himself as Ando. He mentions he's heard a lot about Alia from her sister and boldly asks her out on a date. But the cold-hearted Alia immediately rejects him. In front of everyone, Ando persists and asks Alia if he can at least have her number. But she tells him flatly that she has no interest in his pathetic face, shattering his confidence. She also points to his chain and reminds him that it's against school rules before walking away, leaving the students around her stunned that she just destroyed the most popular guy in school. But she doesn't give a damn about it. She heads into her classroom and sits down next to her friend Kuzi, who's sleeping at his desk. She kicks the chair, waking him up as she glares at him, asking if he spent the whole night watching anime again. He tells her that anime is the art form of the gods, and she shouldn't disrespect it. She doesn't understand his yapping and turns away, but when he starts yawning, she ends up saying something in Russian, which embarrasses her. She claims that it was nothing, after which Kuze starts looking for his chemistry book, realizing that he forgot to bring it. Alia agrees to share her book, so he moves his chair closer, and the class starts. In the middle, he falls asleep again while the teacher was asking questions. Alia pokes him with a pen, making him jump in pain. The teacher asks if he knows the answer, and he stands up, not even knowing what the question was. He looks at Alia, who points to the word copper, and he immediately blurts it out. But it's the wrong answer, after which Alia stands up and gives the correct answer. They sit down, and Kuze asks why she's making fun of him, but she claims that he should be aware that people can lie. He calls her a bad friend, but she replies with something in Russian. She claims it meant stupid, but Kuze isn't convinced. He realizes that she actually called him cute since she doesn't know he understands a little bit of Russian. When he was a kid, a Russian girl moved into his neighborhood, and he picked up some phrases from her. Alia doesn't know that Kuze can understand almost everything she says, but knows if he calls her out, she will die of embarrassment. As soon as class ends, Kuze pulls out his phone. Alia reminds him it's against the rules, but he insists it's an emergency. He has a chance to win a special prize in the game. He checks his screen, then yells in excitement that he got the moon goddess. Curious, Alia grabs his phone and sees a silver-haired woman on the screen. She hands it back, while he simps over the goddess like a total weirdo. Alia seems a bit hurt, as quietly mumbles in Russian that even she has silver hair. When Kuze asks what she said, she claims that she called him a nerd. Kuze shakes his head, explaining that he's not a nerd, since he only plays free-to-play characters, unlike those who spends money in games. Alia simply tells him that he will die alone if he stays a shut-in like this. Then she walks away. At lunch, Kuze sits with his friends at their usual table. Maru, the bald creep, and Kyo, the blondie. Maru starts complaining about how he has never had a girl and will probably die alone, when suddenly they spot Alia and her group entering the cafeteria, looking for seats. Kyo admires the beauty of the Russian sisters, while Maru gossips about how he heard Masha is dating someone and keeps rejecting guys who approach her. Kuze tells Maru he wouldn't stand a chance, even if he were the last guy on Earth, while the baldy tells him to shut up and accuses him of being smug just because Alia talks to him. Kuze glances over at her, then admits she mostly just snaps at him. But Maru is a bit of a degenerate and says he wouldn't mind. He'd actually enjoy being verbally berated. Maru claims that if he had a chance, he'd go for Yuki, as she seems the most approachable. But Kyo brings him back to reality, pointing out that Yuki has rejected even more guys than Alia or Masha. Just then, Kuze notices Alia and Yuki walking their way. Yuki smiles at him, asking if they can sit at their table. He agrees, and Yuki immediately takes the seat beside him, while Alia sits across, looking a bit grumpy. Yuki starts chatting with Kuze about how they both like spicy ramen. Meanwhile, Alia quietly frowns at her omelet. Alia asks if they know each other. Yuki smiles, saying they've been friends since childhood. Kuze then asks if Yuki is friends with Alia, and Yuki replies, not yet, but hopefully soon. Alia looks down, quietly saying she wouldn't mind. After a bit, Maru and Kyo realize they're the third wheel and move to another table, leaving the three of them alone. Yuki immediately shifts closer to Kuze, which annoys Alia. She asks Kuze if he wants to join the council, saying she's offered him a position. Kuze declines, saying he's not interested, but Yuki persists, insisting he'd be a good fit alongside her and Alia. She also mentions that he was vice president back in middle school. This surprises Alia. Kuze explains that back then he was VP while Yuki was president, but it was only because each president had to have a VP partner. Yuki turns to Alia, telling her that Kuze, despite his looks, is actually responsible and can get things done. Alia, looking annoyed, sips her cola and mutters in Russian that she already knows that and doesn't need Yuki to tell her. After lunch, Yuki says goodbye, leaving Alia and Kuze alone. Alia immediately asks him if he and Yuki are close. Kuze replies that they're just good friends and asks why Alia seems surprised. She shrugs, saying she never thought any girl would want to be friends with a nerd, but he points at her, reminding her she's a girl and his friend. Alia is taken aback and claims that she is indeed his friend before quickly walking off, claiming she forgot something in the office. Later that night, Kuze dreams about his childhood and the Russian girl he played with every day. She taught him a bit of Russian, and since she didn't know any Japanese, he pushed himself to learn Russian just to talk to her. Kuze wakes up from the dream with a sad expression, realizing that at this point, he doesn't even remember her name. He doesn't go back to sleep, but decides to head to school early. When he arrives, he ends up cleaning the entire classroom. By the time Alia arrives, the classroom is spotless. Kuze tells her that he woke up early and had nothing else to do. Alia walks over to her desk, and Kuze notices a stain on her socks. She explains that while walking, a truck drove through a puddle and splashed her, but she has extra socks, so it's no big deal. Then she looks at Kuze and asks again if he really doesn't want to join the student council. Kuze sighs and replies that he has no interest in it at all. Alia looks a bit disappointed, but then she pulls off her sock, noticing that Kuze quickly looks away. Smirking, she decides to mess with him and asks him to bring a spare sock from her locker. He nervously averts his eyes and goes to the locker to get it, but she surprises him by asking him to put the sock on her foot. Kuze is left shocked at that. But Alia claims that it must be a treat for a creep like him, and he realizes it indeed is a treat, but then hears her mumble in Russian that it's also a treat for her. Anyhow, he drops to his knees and grabs her foot, surprising Alia, who didn't think he'd actually do it. She tries to pull away, but he holds her foot gently and slides the sock on slowly. As Kuze pulls the sock up, his hand accidentally touches her thigh, which gets him a swift kick to the face that knocks him out. Embarrassed, Alia quickly gets up and hurries away. Later that day, he texts his nerd community that he might have a thing for feet, but he notices Alia still seems a bit mad. When she walks out, he follows her, immediately apologizing. She turns around, admitting it was actually her fault for kicking him, and reaches out to touch his neck, asking if he's hurt. He immediately backs off, claiming she has nothing to apologize for. As she showed him a peek of the promised Neverland, he bows down and thanks her for the spectacular view, which gets him a punch to the face, knocking him down again. She starts running away, calling him a creep in Russian, but he keeps following her while she tells him to get lost. After a while, he catches up to her and offers her favorite cola as a peace offering. She takes a sip and asks in Russian whether he wants a sip. He ends up chickening out, pretending not to understand what she said. Meanwhile, Alia smiles and, in Russian, teasingly claims that she can express her feelings in a language he'll never understand. Kuze stands there, knowing full well that he understands Russian, but decides to keep it to himself for now. A few days later, Yuki calls Kuze to help clear the council room. As they chat, Alia suddenly emerges from behind a stack of boxes, looking a bit pissed to see the closeness between Yuki and Kuze. Kuze realizes that Yuki planned all this to mess with him. As they clean up, Yuki keeps chatting with him, which makes Alia more annoyed. She snaps at him to focus on work. Seeing the chance, Yuki excuses herself and leaves. Suddenly, Kuze hears Alia quietly mumble in Russian that even she wants his attention too. She keeps telling him to come near her in Russian. Smugly, Alia thinks that she's practically throwing herself at him, yet he has no clue. Meanwhile, Kuze is wondering what kind of bold, impulsive thought leads someone to speak so openly. Thankfully for him, the remaining work is finished quickly, and he's just about to leave when, suddenly, the door swings open. A tall senior steps into the room, looking surprised to see everything already spotless. Yuki quickly tells him that Kuze helped them clean up. The senior smiles and thanks Kuze, introducing himself as Ken, the president of the student council. Ken adds that he's heard a lot about Kuze from both Alia and Yuki, which only makes Kuze feel awkward. Sensing the tension, he decides it's time to leave. However, Ken stops, insisting that since Kuze helped them after school, he owes him dinner as a thank you. Kuze declines, saying that he was just helping some friends. Before Kuze could leave, Yuki quickly spoke up, urging him to accept the gift. She pointed out that he had to cook for himself anyway. Ken, deciding for everyone, invited Yuki and Alia to join them for dinner as well. That evening, they all met at a small diner. As they sat down, Ken thanked Kuze again for his help with the council work. Yuki also mentioned how skilled Kuze was at physical tasks, always finishing them quickly. Moreover, he's an expert negotiator as well. Ken immediately recognizes Kuze's talent and offers him a position in the student council. However, Kuze politely refuses once again, explaining that he's done with student council work. He didn't enjoy it during middle school, so he's not interested. Ken agrees that it's a lot of work, but he adds that it also has its benefits. Being in the student council gives you an automatic recommendation to the best colleges in the country. But even after this, Kuze shows no interest, as he simply wants to watch anime and enjoy life. Unfortunately for him, Yuki wouldn't stop writing him, and tells him that they can run for the next council president once again, just like they did in middle school. Kuze refuses this time more firmly, while Ken tells him that Yuki is going to have tough competition, as Alia is also going to run for the council president. Kuze had no idea about it. He looks at Alia for confirmation, and she nods, telling him that she will indeed run against Yuki in the upcoming election. Before they could continue the conversation, their food arrives. After dinner, they all say their goodbyes, with Ken and Yuki heading in one direction. This leaves Kuze to drop Alia off at her place. On the way back, Kuze asks Alia if she's really planning to run against Yuki. She doesn't seem eager to talk about it, and casually replies that she'll be fine on her own from here. Kuze says goodbye and heads home, only to find Yuki sprawled on the couch, absorbed in a romantic novel. It turns out that Yuki is actually Kuze's real sister, but she's pretending to be his love interest to make Alia jealous and want him more. Kuze, annoyed, tells her he doesn't need her help and heads to bed. The next morning, Kuze is woken up by his annoying sister once again. She jumps on his bed and asks him to do something naughty. And that's where this video ends. If you want to see the next part, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.